It's July 1st, and it's Rob Crawley and Seth Stewart with wethepeoplemeet.org discussing the Constitution and several topics that relate to that. And we'll let you take it away, Seth.
All right. Well, I guess just to cut to the chase here, thanks for hosting us again, Rob. I appreciate this.
Hmm.
Um, what I want to know, and this is a question that I want to raise with every Republican, every Democrat, everybody, is how do the rats keep getting into the grain bin, right? How do we keep on losing freedoms even when we have these, symbolic victories for either side on an issue? Why is it that the government keeps getting bigger? Why, for example, did the
Hey,
big beautiful
Elon.
bill get
Oh,
passed
I got the biggest
last?
bombshell for you guys.
Sorry, that was I can hear the audio there, by the way.
Yeah.
Thanks. Good after
You're playing
USA
a
password.
video that I sent here.
Sorry,
Um,
I clicked on that while you were talking. I didn't know it was going to jump into audio. But anyway, go
yeah,
ahead.
no worries. Anyways, yeah, he's playing this video that I did back in January on the Federal Reserve with Elon Musk calling to uh, well, finding all this corruption and waste in government. And I said, you know what? He's never going to get around to auditing the Federal Reserve. There's been lip service given to this by both him and Donald Trump. They're never going to do it because they're both beneficiaries of it. And I
Mhm.
think we're continuing to see the proof of that. But yeah, this is one of the big first things is we need to realize we the people are not in control right now. We have a huge bloated government. The fact that we have parties that are supposedly fighting for us doesn't actually solve the problem. Um, and to put it very bluntly, the one of the primary weapons that's being used against us is our own money. If you look at the Communist Manifesto, for example, one of the planks in there is a graduated income tax. The problem with an income tax, there you go,
Mhm.
is the fact that as your government, as the people grow in prosperity, you guarantee that your government will grow in proportion, at least, to the power of the people. And if you add taxes onto that, taxes upon taxes, then the our modern tax system is basically like an infinitely long cheese grater, right? You lose money just by transacting, and that is a huge problem because basically we the people should be able to grow without limit, and our government should always be kept within strict limits. But whenever you give your government and the regime in power just tons and tons of money, they're going to find things to do with that, and you're basically paying them to take more money and power away from you. And so that's the fundamental problem. That's why that plank is right there in the Communist Manifesto, is that graduated income tax. There were only four types of taxation allowed originally under the Constitution. There was the only kind of direct tax that was allowed was a census tax, a capitation tax. In other words, you pay just a flat amount just for being a person. You're a person, you pay X amount in taxes, just like in the days of the Savior's mortal sojourn. They'd all go to. That's how the account of his birth begins, was with a decree that all the land should be taxed, right? Um, and even though that was an empire, by the way, that was what they did. They exacted tribute. And the American way is to have a census tax, and that means that the management of the government, the costs should be proportional to the number of people that they are serving, right? It shouldn't be proportional to how much money you're making, right? So it doesn't matter if you have some really great business and you're doing a lot of great service in the world, the government doesn't deserve a piece of it. But virtually every morally bankrupt economic theory out there relies on this kind of an assertion. Keynesian economics, for example, the assertion that the strength of the economy is proportional to the amount of money that people are currently spending, and since the government supposedly has some authority over economy, which it does not, has like zero authority to do anything to your economy except regulate, which simply means to make regular. It doesn't mean they get to say how you spend your money. So they can fix weights and measures, and that's about it. That's what regulate interstate commerce means. Boom. They can set weights and measures. That's about it, right?
Mhm.
No, they can't tell you that you're not allowed to grow corn, or that you have to destroy this amount of your crop, or you're not allowed to make this without a license or permit or whatever. No authority is granted to them to do that. Anyways, I'm waxing a little bit loquacious here, but the point being that you only have government to protect the rights of the people. The purpose of government isn't to have money pots and to manage them efficiently and stuff. That's very much a John Curtis style of talking point. That's one of the things he did a lot when he was mayor of Provo. He's like, oh, I'll manage your money pots wisely, and look how much money I spent, look how much money I saved, blah, blah, blah. When a politician just starts talking about managing money, like that's their job, like I've heard many people say is their job. I heard my city council mayor say this. I think it was. It was either the mayor or one of the council members saying it's our job to spend money, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's your job to implement the safeguards pursuant to your enumerated powers. That's it, right? And there is some amount of taxation and appropriation that goes into that. But if you ever think of it as it's their job to spend money, no, it isn't. Anyways, the reason why I'm big on money and big against these taxes and so on is the fact that we need to keep the government within these confines. The I don't know that the Supreme Court has ever issued a ruling, by the way, on what inflation officially is. Um, I would love to raise that case. Um, that's an interesting question for a future day. But just backing it up here a little bit, just giving the moral backdrop here. We know that the enemy of mankind, Lucifer, swore from the very beginning that he would use money, that he would steal money, basically, and use that money for a very specific purpose. And that purpose is to commandeer the world's militaries and cause nonstop bloodshed. And that's his purpose. That's his purpose, is to use money, buy up armies, use them to turn this beautiful creation, this beautiful world that our Heavenly Father created for us, into a nonstop massacre. Because the spirit of the adversary is the spirit of destruction. And this is something that we too often don't realize is the role of money in that. We've said before, the scriptures say that the love of money is the root of all evil. But too often, the adversaries weaponize that against us because we're gullible. We're not very smart about this. Because we think, oh, capitalism is bad because love of money is bad. Capitalism isn't the love of money. Capitalism is a term that was coined by Marx anyway. So don't use your enemy's terminology in the first place. Capitalism, properly understood, simply means property rights and a free market. That's it. And the Lord has affirmed that consecration, which will be in play during the millennium and should be active in the lives of the Latter-day Saints right now, that is something that is predicated on property rights and a free market. You can't have consecration without property rights and a free market. That's why Satan is trying to destroy those. It's because it competes with his fake power structures. Anyways, so just to try to put this topic in a nutshell here, as I've stated before, you look at the official inflation rate since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, which, by the way, wasn't even the beginning of inflation in the States, but the effective inflation rate that they've reported on already reveals that they have stolen in excess of 97% of all privately held wealth since 1913. So that's a huge problem because our government could have, huge pallets full of cash that we know nothing about. Rob and I were talking just before this about how Nazi Germany was creating a new fake financial system to fund their war machine, and how the former Soviet Union is still under a kind of an iron curtain with respect to financial disclosure, to the point where we don't know where people are being held in prison camps to labor and build things. There's a lot of economic output that is not being reported to the Western world. And so if we only look at what is being reported to the Western world, or what our own government is willing to confess to us that they're doing, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. Anyways, so I would just submit that anybody who doesn't think that the financial side of things is something to keep our government accountable on, it really is, because this is literally how Iran was able to afford to barrage Israel with missiles and so on. It's how every war starts. It's through governments stealing money from their people and commandeering those assets to gain control over the world's militaries, and then pick fights. So, uh, what can we do about it? Of course, we can become as self-reliant as we can, as quickly as we can. That's something we can all strive to do, and just get out of the modern fake money system, because the Fed dollar is completely fake. It's just an IOU. The bill in dollar bill stands for bill of credit. It's literally an IOU. Federal Reserve note, promissory note, IOU. It's not real money, and we're not obligated to accept it as money. Joseph Smith said this actually as one of his talking points to the people of Nauvoo. And this is one of the reasons why I'm running for city council, is because as a municipality, you can actually set it into your municipal code saying the currency of the people of American Fork, Utah shall be gold and silver coin. That is to say, the Constitution allows you to make those laws. And if you don't make them and hold yourselves to them, then people can come into your town with this fake money that is literally, they just stole it. Yeah, I just got this from a printing press. Here you go. The government says I can buy your land. And we're like, well, how do you respond to that? Just don't accept their fake money. I know it's really tempting to do so, but then when you do accept that fake money that came off of the Federal Reserve's printing presses, then you're actually exacerbating the problem, because it's incentivizing. You're on the take now, see? And then you want more of that fake money to just appear, so that these people, these government agents, can come and just hand you some more of this fake cash. What I think just about everyone doesn't realize, including people here in Utah who are sitting on these houses that have gotten egregiously inflated in value, they're like, yeah, that's great, I want them to keep on going up. And so they're actually Republicans. This is something I hadn't realized before. But Utah Republicans, Latter-day Saints of all people, have actually been incentivized by our own government to encourage inflation. Why? Because it makes the nominal dollar amount of their held assets go up. And so they get free money from the government, but it's not really free, because they're actually paying for it and everyone else is too. So it's a lose-lose. Anyways, so there are things we can do to oppose that. Sorry, that was a little bit of a monologue on how we can resist financial tyranny.
Mhm.
Hopefully actionable enough for anybody. But yeah, I don't trust Elon Musk or Donald Trump or anybody else to go and just solve the problem for us, because
Mhm.
they're on
Here's
the take.
here's a quick related question, but I mean, it is going off on a tangent, but just really quickly, I've got a question for you. Um, Hold on one second. Okay, I'm back. Question I have is, so recently, Mike Lee tried to put in the big beautiful bill, that the U.S. government would let go of their ownership of some of the land in Utah, which I know that even John Curtis had that as part of his campaign trail hot item, is that the federal government owns too much of our land. He's going to help us get rid of that problem and get some federal government lands back into our states. Um, I think getting more land that can be purchased and sold, that increases the supply. That would hopefully reduce the land and home prices. If that, I'm not in favor of the big beautiful bill, but it seems like that's at least one good thing that was in it, but that was taken out of it now, like other good things have been taken out of it to make it just a big horrible bill. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because knowing who our enemies are is important,
Yeah.
and knowing that our enemies sponsored and supported this bill um, is an important tidbit of information.
Uh-huh.
Um,
My
what?
enemies haven't, because I really like Mike Lee, and I think he's voted more according to the Constitution than any other senator in the whole United States. So he was my friend, and I think he was doing it for a good reason. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's his.
but that just that part of that bill. You're talking about the big beautiful bill is our enemies being,
On the whole, and that issue individually. So
yeah,
it should cause us. It shouldn't automatically result in us saying, "Oh, I know that therefore the sale of public lands must be bad or good," just because
yeah,
someone supposedly sponsored it or favored it or whatever. There's a
right,
lot of confusion that's creeping into the system here, right?
right, right,
Um,
right.
But so let's just tackle this one issue: sale of public lands, good thing or bad. Joseph Smith advocated for the sale of public lands as a means to bankroll the freeing of the slaves. Brilliant idea. The federal government had too much land. But let's just look at some of the dynamics in play here and say, is this a good choice? And look at the timing too. So you look at Utah's founding. Utah was extorted very massively by the federal government to uh, disband their local parties, and the government forced them to join the national parties, which is
Yeah.
really corrupt. Polygamy was forever gone. Plural marriage they could never do. That was written into the Enabling Act. But also the seizure of lands. The federal government seized like a huge portion of Utah territory, which is one of the reasons why housing has gotten so expensive in Utah. And if I could rewind the clock like 20 years and then just do all this math, like all this stuff was completely predictable because of these situations that they'd baked in earlier. Because we've been geographically constrained to a fairly narrow corridor, like the I-15 corridor and a couple of satellites. And that's about it. That's about all that the federal government has actually allowed us to settle here, despite the original, one city in every direction, half a day's journey apart was the Brigham Young settlement model, Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, which is brilliant because land prices will always be low if you do that, and you can always have self-sustaining cities and get rid of the urban sprawl problem. But let's look at the timing, because the timing is actually suspect here. If you have a condition where you look at like the finances of the nation, you look at the average amount that an American is in debt. I think the average American has like currently 7 or 8 thousand, I think, in credit card debt. And I think Utah is actually like one of the top handful, if not the top, in terms of recurring debt. They're also one of the best at paying off their debts, but they are also one of the most indebted. So if you look at that and you say, okay, how much financial freedom do we really have? This is the conversation my wife and I had, right?
Mhm.
And we're talking with some friends and fellow saints. We've been having these conversations for years to just say, we would just love it if some piece of wilderness just got opened up to where we could just go and buy land and go and help to fund the infrastructure and build settlements and create a new city, because that's the sustainable growth model here. Um,
Yeah.
and so we would jump at the chance. Problem is finances. Who's got all the money, right? So my prediction is if this, I think they were toying with it right now, and the timing is not quite right on their end. But I
Mhm.
believe that they're at least somewhat in earnest about releasing these public lands for sale, in part because there's a massive shift at the national, state, and local level right now to consolidate government power, and to do so in the disguise of private institutions
Mhm.
like BlackRock and Vanguard, which, by the way, receive liquid injections from the Federal Reserve and so on. So those lands go up for sale. Who's going to buy them?
That's a
Okay,
good point.
a
I
handful
was
of
thinking
wealthy.
other countries too. I mean, is there going to be a rule that other countries cannot be part of that purchasing of the land? That was one of my concerns before it got rejected, is who is going to be buying it. That's a good
and
point.
and that's a major question of optics and principle. I'm
Mhm.
not entirely convinced that it even matters that much anymore. I think we should continue to keep an eye on that, but we should be aware of the other cheetah too, which is our own government, masquerading as private American-owned entities. And so, like when I hear Donald Trump talking up, we're going to bring things back to America to be manufactured.
Mhm.
That is not. That does not mean this is the golden age of American manufacturing we're entering into right now. I mean, uh, Elon Musk was just giving a tour, a digital tour of his new uh, battery production facility and so on, which I think it's great to manufacture batteries here. But guess what? Do the people own that? No, they don't. A guy who was bankrolled by taxpayer subsidies is the manager of that, right? And so what's happening here, what's actually happening with the Made in America movement under Trump, the MAGA Made in America movement anyway, is it's actually national socialism because of the subsidies. So he's bringing some businesses back under this careful subsidization. But as my friends here in Utah and elsewhere who have actually gone into business for themselves, small business owners, the real Americans behind the product, they're getting edged out of the market by these massive subsidy players and by the things like the Corporate Transparency Act, which basically force you to disclose intellectual property to such a degree that it forces you to shutter your business, right?
Mhm.
And people should know about this. People should really know about this because you have all these private organizations coming in. Oh, we're going to come in and build some fancy new town and housing development and stuff. It's like, okay, do we the people own any of that? No, we don't, right? So that's just what I would look out for there, is to say it's not necessarily a good thing if once they have amassed all of the financial means and then they say, oh, we're sorry about that. We're going to go and give you power back to the people now. We're going to sell these public lands to ourselves using your money in disguise so that you think it's a victory.
Hmm.
That's what I'd look out for.
So big businesses buying up the land that are subsidized by the government, so it's quasi-government buying up the land, and it looks like it's getting that's the concern you have there.
Yeah, I mean, and just look at Spencer Cox's Build Council. Look at the restrictions they placed on the incorporation of municipalities, the fees, the if because if the people were to go and pool together their resources and say we're going to go incorporate a new municipality
Mhm.
in such and such you know uh, just across the border from Elko. I'm trying to name the places out in the like desert territory that don't have any settlements there yet, hardly.
Yeah.
But just if we were to do that, well, they just tied our hands with regards to our own popular sovereignty. They're
Mhm.
undermining the doctrine of popular sovereignty so that you have to comply with the Build Council's restrictions and rules and regulations if you're going to incorporate or assert any amount of local autonomy in these new regions that you're occupying. So even if you had the financial means to do it, that doesn't mean that you're going to be allowed to maintain that autonomy over your own fiscal resources because of these rules that come from these unappointed and unelected bureaucrats, or unelected bureaucrats anyway, uh, in these public-private partnerships. And they also have powers to tax. They have powers to create economic development zones and seize property without redress and without just compensation. So I'm like, look at that. And there's actually going to be a meeting with Trent Staggs next Monday evening, I think at 9 p.m. It is. I just
Uh-huh.
got a notice from that. Check with Christy Henshaw and the UCRP, Utah County Republican Party, on Facebook,
Mhm.
because I think there's going to be something really good about the Build Council and other developments on that front. So I'm keenly watching for that.
Mhm. Sounds good. Um, so where I guess the Constitution, since that's the topic of the day, is there somewhere in the Constitution that protects us from this type of behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the exact point that I brought up to John Curtis. So if you go to Article 1, Section 10,
Uh-huh.
this is what I refer to as Article 1, Section 10 currency. And there are a lot more things than this, but
Uh-huh.
if we're just looking at the currency issue.
Hmm.
Okay, so Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1. Uh,
Yeah.
no state shall dot 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 make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. Now, the courts and their federal allies have weaseled around this by saying, well, but the federal government can make anything other than gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts.
Because they
They've
forgot about
rationalized
the
it that
10th
way.
Amendment, huh?
They forgot about the 10th Amendment, and they also forgot about the fact that the only places that the United States could spend any of the money it has coined is in the states,
Mm.
unless you've got some kind of foreign currency exchange or something like that. But the fact is, this explicitly states that autonomy does rest with the states to make anything out of gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. And this is what we have the capacity to do. Any state, Illinois, Utah, Mississippi, you name it, could just go ahead and make a law that literally says gold shall be the official currency of the state of Utah. Silver shall be the official currency of the state of Nevada. In California, we accept gold or silver, right? And that would enable us to hedge against these encroachments so
Yeah.
that no state could actually be controlled by the Fed dollar. We can do it in the municipalities too. And so if I'm elected to the American Fork City Council, I'm going to evangelize this to the people. I'm going to try to get us to become economically self-reliant in our little local microcosm here and switch our currency system over to something that's actually real money. And if there's buy-in from the population here, and we actually set a municipal code, then the federal government can't walk all over us at all. The state government can't walk over us. They can't come here with their monopoly money and buy our property because we'd have to demand that they give us gold or silver coin. And I've heard people, like, the number one complaint I heard from somebody who was interviewing me for this, just real quick, was to say, well, but what about gas stations? How would people pay there? And I'm like, if you want to carry a couple of, real money coins in your pocket to pay for gas or groceries or whatever, that's what people used to do. And if you think it's too much of an inconvenience, then I'm sorry, but you're allowing the federal government to steal 97% of your property because that's your convenience tax right there, and you have no way to check them. So, you know, oh, but what if somebody holds you up at gunpoint and tries to take your? Okay, so arm yourself, defend yourself, right? People used to do that too until they started trusting other people to do it for them, and guess what? Their money wasn't safe because it was the bankers then who were whittling it away. Anyways, so that's how you insulate against that. That's a very simple protection. Is
Mm.
you just don't accept anything that isn't real money, and in as much as you have any lawmaking power, you make laws that say we don't accept anything that isn't real money, and this is what real money is per the Constitution. So that's how you'd address that part of it. The local sovereignty we can get into if you have interest.
Mhm.
But that's
All
an
right, should
example.
we go to the federal judges question?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
the Supreme Court said that federal judges cannot individually make a law to curtail the efforts of the President of the United States, right? Isn't that
They're
kind
not
of
allowed
what
to
they end up?
issue universal injunctions.
Yep. Which that kind of makes sense to me that someone over this district area cannot say, okay, I'm going to make a rule that applies to the entire United States because you've got so many other district judges that could rule the other way and it's chaos. So anyway, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I have actually downloaded this decision and started reading through it because
Mhm.
I want to know exactly what their arguments are and where they shut the door and where they left the door open.
Mhm.
I do have a little screen share here if you're open to that for just a minute.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, let me see. Send you the request to share my screen. Okay, still says sharing's not turned on.
Oh, yeah, I've got to do that. There you go. Okay.
Super. All right. So this right here, Trump v. Casa Inc. So this is what I've got here. Just a little bit of my note taking on this so far. So
Uh-huh.
this in particular is a response to lawsuits to enjoin, so to issue an injunction against the implementation and enforcement of President Trump's executive order number 14160, protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. I've done a video on this previously where I unpacked. There's actually a poison pill that Trump put in here that violates Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution.
Mhm.
And the wording specifically is already right here. So this is extremely relevant to the concerns I already raised on this issue. So the executive order identifies circumstances in which a person born in the United States is not, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So this is a 14th Amendment clause that it's honestly really weird that
Mhm.
the 14th Amendment even made any kind of assertion about citizenship being connected, being, quote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. In fact, it's most countries have what is citizenship by blood, right? So you do have birthright citizenship based on, oh, my parents were both American citizens and I was born to them, and therefore I'm an American citizen too. That is the rational way to do things, but
Mhm.
by soil is kind of the new standard. Sorry, I don't want to get into that too much because so many people make this about the citizenship thing. It's not about citizenship, really. And this is what I'm going to get into. Is not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's a poison pill, because not subject to the jurisdiction thereof is in this case being used as weasel words to say Article 3 doesn't apply to you.
Mhm.
You have no recourse in the United States courts. Because if the president or the Supreme Court or anyone having some supposed authority can say you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, where does that leave you then as far as legal recourse? Right to appeal, right to due process, right? They're going to say, well, we don't have anything to do with you. Sorry. And that's what Trump's executive order did to the children of non citizens. Anyways, so the not being recognized as an American citizen is something of a red herring in this issue. But we're talking about the power of the courts, right? And what does that have to do with this? Um, so the district court entered a universal injunction against this, right? So an injunction barring executive officials from applying the executive order to anyone, not just the plaintiffs. And the main finding of this, I'm just going to kind of scroll to it. They punt on the question of whether the Trump's executive order is constitutional or not. It's not.
Mhm.
Um, but they say, okay, our primary holding is that universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to federal courts. Did you notice the poison pill in there?
Congress has given to federal courts. Um, does Congress give power to the federal courts? I didn't think that came from Congress because Congress is one of it comes from the Constitution, doesn't it? And from
Yes.
the judicial branch, not the legislative branch.
Yes, I would say that's the perfect question to be asking here.
Hmm.
And so I'd say you hit the nail on the head here in that Congress does not. Like, I envision it kind of like Congress is this little flower pot, and the
Hmm.
courts are like the flower growing out of the flower pot. Are the courts dependent on Congress for their authority? There is a clause in the Constitution that's pertinent here. So if we go to, let's see. All right. So Article 1 and the power to, oh, what's the word? There's a specific word. I think it's to establish courts. Is that right? Ah, here we go. So Article 3, it's referenced in Article 3, and there's a part of it that's also in Article 1 that is a congressional duty. And this is the clause. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So ordain and establish. The judges, shall receive remuneration, etc. So, all right, here we go. So the Congress does have authority to ordain and establish inferior courts.
Hmm.
But here's the thing: Congress doesn't have any authority to uh, diminish or expand the jurisdictional purview of the courts collectively, right?
Hmm.
All they can do is partition that jurisdiction in a manner that satisfies constitutional guarantees, right? So they're not allowed actually to. I have a friend who insists that I'm wrong about this, but they're not allowed to partition jurisdiction and the appellate structure in such a way that would materially deny you your right to appeal, right?
Hmm.
So this is not carte blanche. This is not the Constitution and we the people, therefore, saying this is not us saying, oh, Congress, you get to decide whether or not there should even be a judiciary. You get to decide what all their powers should be. No, Article 3 specifies all the powers and all the jurisdiction that shall pertain to the court system collectively and to the Supreme Court specifically. And most other matters of differentiation between court responsibilities is left to Congress to decide. So it's true that Congress can partition authority one way or another, but they're
Hmm.
not actually allowed to like grant authority
Yeah.
to any given court as though it were theirs to give, right? So that's the core here. And what I've seen so far, the Supreme Court in this decision hasn't even cited or made reference to the Constitution once. They're
Mhm.
just making it about Congress. What does Congress let us do? Well, then that's checks. That's shakes and alliances, not checks and balances, right? So
Yes.
it spells collusion. Anyways, so this is my first issue here: is they're looking to Congress, not to the Constitution, to decide the total scope of jurisdiction and so on. But the overall question as well is, do these federal courts have authority to universally enjoin the enforcement of an executive order? And frankly, I agree with their primary holding. I just don't agree with how they arrived at that conclusion or the consequences of their new determination. And so
Yeah.
this is why I've highlighted this part in purple. This is the royal finding here, is to say universal injunctions are not sufficiently analogous to any relief available in the court of equity in England at the time of founding. Like, yeah, this is something they're admitting this is something they just made up,
Hmm.
right? and so that's key. Anyways, I can go more into this later, but like the the key finding, and they're looking at history and tradition, which is partially informative, like because there is a smoking gun to say they made this up, and they're admitting that they made it up,
Hmm.
but they're not actually getting around to actually grounding it in the Constitution, right? So yeah, the primary finding that they don't have authority to issue universal injunctions is correct, right? And if you want a really authoritative document on that, go to Federalist number 78, which deals with
Hmm.
the courts and explicitly states that the courts have no, uh, it doesn't have force or will. Those are not attributes that were conferred upon the courts by the Constitution. But two big red flags here. One is that this decision falls short of revoking the judiciary's traditional license for judicial supremacy, right? Because this only covers universal injunctions from federal courts. I haven't read yet whether or not they apply that to themselves as the Supreme Court as well. I don't know that yet. But they're only saying injunctions. So
I
executive
would
does
think
something.
the Supreme Court would have the authority from the Constitution to declare something unconstitutional that a president does. That's isn't that the check and balance that we're supposed to have with the three forms of government that the federal government should be able to call any one of Donald Trump's executive orders unconstitutional and nullify it, right?
Yeah, so there is. I love the term you just used there, because the precept of judicial review was largely invented by way of the ruling in Marbury versus Madison in 1803.
Hmm.
There is a truthful component to it, and that's the nullification aspect you're talking about.
Yeah.
The ability to just issue an order to everyone that says, hey, we have found this to be unconstitutional and you're not allowed to do it, period, right?
Mhm.
At that moment when they're free, they're perfectly free to find that something is unconstitutional, and they're perfectly free to go and publish that opinion and that decision, right? But the minute they say, therefore, no one in the country is allowed to have a law that bans abortion or something like that,
That's judicial. That's the legislative branch. Yes.
they are legislating from the bench,
Right.
right? And so
Yep.
that's where we have to be super careful to say,
Hmm.
yeah, I agree that judges have authority to pronounce something unconstitutional. In fact, you and I both have authority to pronounce something unconstitutional.
Right.
We have binding nullification authority because we have each entered into an oath of citizenship that says we will support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We
Mhm.
couldn't do that if we had to uh, give up our judgment and just pass the buck to some panel of Nazgul, sorry, justices on a Supreme Court panel somewhere, and say we have to worship and obey whatever your opinion is about what's constitutional. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. I have a conscience. I can read. I'm a citizen. I can interpret and apply the Constitution, and I can nullify things that are unconstitutional in my own personal life. I have authority to do that. A tyrannical government could still try to hold me to account for a law that is unconstitutional, but then a jury should acquit me, right? That's how it's supposed to work. That's the escape valve. But anyway, so the jury was bound and gagged and thrown in the basement, and then judges took it upon themselves to try to uh, obtain equitable and criminal relief on behalf of all people proactively, which is not within their authority to do. So that's point number one. It's just to say they didn't they didn't remove the scepter altogether because they're only attacking this one aspect. And injunctions, by the way, are a form of relief. So you see, they're not getting rid of their power to harm you, but they have limited their power to help you. And point number two, I would say that's concerning about this is if they do hold that the federal courts generally outside of the Supreme Court have no authority to do XYZ, but the Supreme Court totally does, then that's concentrating power into fewer and fewer hands. It's not eliminating those unjust powers, it's retaining them, but just narrowing the circle of those who are able to exercise it, thereby erasing checks and balances. So those are my two major concerns with this so far.
Uh,
Um, in addition to the fact, and this is a fact, that their ruling, Trump's executive order, does in fact uh, expose children of non-citizens to child trafficking. That is what its ultimate, most probable, most impactful effect would be, in my estimation, because it explicitly declares that yeah, your parents can be deported. Oh, you're getting trafficked by gangs and whatever. Sorry, there's nothing we can do because you're not subject to our laws. You're not subject to our jurisdiction. There is no equitable relief process for you. There is no criminal relief process for you because we're just going to treat you like you don't exist. You are now officially forgotten. And Trump has threatened to do the same thing to US citizens. Children are going to be trafficked because of this. This is exactly the opposite of what Trump promised to do, and he's pretending to do it
Mhm.
so that we think the threat's gone, when in fact, he's entrenching it.
Interesting. Um, and then erasure of checks and balances.
Yeah, I do just want to have one more plug on the judicial thing, and
Yes,
this has
yes.
been occupying a fair amount of my time recently. I did get my petition docketed with the Supreme Court,
Right.
and I think it's cute that they docketed it on June 4th, which
Hmm.
means that the 30-day deadline for filing an amicus brief and for the response from the reply brief from the respondent is July 4th, Independence Day.
Hmm.
So, um, so yeah,
Interesting.
anybody who wants to join and help make this more popular. See, the issue here is, and I get right into this with my questions presented here, because I go way beyond what the Supreme Court just did, saying, oh, we're not allowed to issue injunctions
Hmm.
to help you. And I said, okay, well, I'm just asking them to put down the scepter entirely. Just eliminate judicial supremacy and overreach altogether. And it boils down to this precept of binding stare decisis, which means Latin, let the decision stand, which is exactly what they resort to, by the way, in their analysis of the constitutionality of judges issuing injunctions, is they examine the precedent, right? But you notice they cherry pick the precedent because the more recent precedent says that universal injunctions are fine.
Hmm.
That's what the Supreme Court did for generations. They're the ones who created that precedent. And now they're suddenly saying, now that the damage has been done, and now that it would be more favorable for the people to have this as a tool for their own defense against the government, now they're saying, oh, whoops, sorry, that was a mistake. That was wrong. We're not doing that anymore. You see how this imperils the people. But what I'm asking for is just to say, hey, judiciaries should not have force or will. They should not be able to compel anyone beyond the res judicata, meaning the matter they're actually adjudicating. If a jury convicts you and you receive a sentence, then yeah, you have to bear that. But no judge actually has authority to say, well, laws banning abortion are unconstitutional and you're not allowed to make any of them. Like, they can say that as an opinion, but no one should be bound by it because then that gives to the judiciary force and will, right?
Right.
So,
Mhm.
and the jury
Well,
is the
it,
gear.
it should direct it can direct legislature to not make a law going against that because that gives them preliminary knowledge that the Supreme Court may call it unconstitutional. So
Yeah,
it might give guidance to legislature, but it shouldn't legislate itself. Yes.
absolutely. They can put the legislature on notice, and the legislature could keep on doing its thing. Here's how that would work. We haven't seen this happen for a
Mhm.
long. I don't know if we've ever seen this happen. Judicial review is almost vanishingly rare.
Yeah.
Judicial review is a real, actual power belonging to the judiciary, but it
Mhm.
extends no further than nullification in the individual case
Yep.
and advice to the legislature or the executive. And the way that works is, let's say Trump decides, I'm going to go ahead with this. Or let's look at a legislature that says, we're going to go ahead and, tax people. We're going to do the toenail tax, whatever. Every time you clip your toenails, you have to give us money or whatever. And the
Hmm.
judge says, that's unconstitutional, right? Sorry for the lame example. Then anytime there's a criminal proceeding and someone is, being tried or convicted over this, right? Then on appeal to the judge who thinks that that's unconstitutional, he's just going to throw it out. He's going to say that law's bad. That law's unconstitutional. I refuse to let this prosecution continue, right? And then what would happen is we would be spending all this money on the judiciary, on these cases, and on these trials, and that would sap the purse. And since Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse, they're like, wow, our budget's getting drained really fast. And then the judge can go and wave his gavel at them and say, yeah, you knuckleheads, it's because you're keeping on trying to impose, and the executive is still trying to enforce this unconstitutional law.
Mhm.
And the executive has full authority as well. If you're a law enforcement officer, you're a sheriff, you're president, whoever, mayor, and there's a law that's bad, you just refuse to enforce it.
5 years.
And
Sorry.
you can still tell the executive, I'm sorry, the legislature, hey, that was a bad law. There should be checks and balances all along the way. It shouldn't be greasing the skids for each other,
Right.
the way we do things today. So yeah, if they grant my petition, then they'll actually retire their scepter, and this circular argument of precedent reinforcing precedent will go away, including the universal injunctions. But then the way we get equitable relief is through a jury, not through a judge. Judges could still nullify things that are wrong in our individual cases, which is correct.
Yeah.
But until we restore jury trials, this is actually a regression, because the ability of the people to receive relief is being diminished.
Yeah. Oh, and I just a thought, your push for trial by jury. Just when I was perusing the Constitution and I saw the word all in regards to all trials shall have a jury. So
Yes. Yes.
it says all. So
Yeah.
anyway, just ran
Absolutely.
across that.
Yeah, and that's why my petition goes out of its way to say, when is a crime not a crime?
Hmm.
Because that's their argument basically, is to say, well, it's not really a crime, it's an infraction. And
Yeah.
I told this to the judge, and I'm like, look, I'm being tried in criminal court.
Five
This
years
is a
ago,
criminal court.
Sorry,
And
popped in again.
and
no worries.
I definitely
Boy,
seen.
I keep pushing pause and it unpauses. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no worries. So, and this is their deal, is they just changed the labels on it. They've done this with immigration
Yeah.
proceedings, they, just by calling it an administrative proceeding or a civil proceeding, therefore you don't get rights, which is a lie. Even if it were a civil proceeding, how much is, like, another example is family courts, and I call that out in here. People who are wanting to overcome the unfairness of family courts, this is how. This
Hmm.
is how, because the courts have traditionally held that you're not entitled to a jury trial, even though it's done under the disguise of a civil proceeding, saying, okay, I get that a divorce proceeding and a custody hearing could be a civil proceeding, but a lot of these are actually criminal charges if they're attributed correctly. But either way, your family's worth way more than $20.
Yeah.
You get a jury. If you want one, you get it, right? Why
Mm.
is the government so deathly afraid of letting the people govern themselves? It's
Yeah.
it's because it would erode their monopoly on power, which is what they have today. And so yeah, and we only do jury trials in like 1% of cases. And Thomas Jefferson is absolutely right. I'm gonna meet him after I die,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna give him, I don't know, the biggest hug and just be like, you're absolutely right. This is the only anchor that
Mm.
we've ever come across that we
Yeah.
could use to keep our government accountable to the Constitution through a nullification, which is
Hold
why our
on one
government.
second.
Good.
I have to take a quick break. I'm going to pause the recording and be back in 2 minutes.
Sounds good. Thanks. All right, so we were going to talk about the erasure of checks and balances, and I wanted to give a little update on the city council race and just like what's going on with the American Fork City Council.
Yeah.
So we very recently, just last Tuesday, had what I think is the final hearing. I mean, yesterday was the deadline for the city to issue its budget. That's the state-imposed deadline. And I'm honestly rather new to a lot of these budget items. There are several I've objected to in the past, like the park tax, because I don't think our tax dollars should be going towards theaters and art groups and performers and stuff. I don't see that as a justified use of our funds because, I mean, ostensibly, this is how, in fact, we know this is how, the kind of avenue that we got drag queen story hour through is this notion that there should be a money pot for cultural sensitivity and blah blah blah, right? And since that's such a vague thing and it's not actually pursuant to any legitimate dispensation of authority to the city, then like it's they're writing checks to all these different organizations, and I'm like, when did we the people vet those organizations? What are they actually doing for us as a people? If somebody wants to run a theater, great, cool. If your play's good, then it should be able to compete in a free market, right?
Yeah.
So, and it does interfere with free market stuff. So, anyways, so we were going over the budget, and I had this thought in my mind ahead of this too. And I just said, hey, I reached out to the city recorder and I said, where is our city's charter? Do you know of one? Because, and this is deeply concerning to me because just like our Constitution, if I can share my screen again here for just a moment. So we have our federal Constitution, which is not an enumeration of the rights of the people. It is an exhaustive enumeration of the powers that we have chosen to delegate to the government, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this tells us definitively what our government can and cannot do. And something a lot of people aren't familiar with is that cities have a similar thing. So states do, obviously, because they have their state constitution, but cities also have charters. And a charter is literally the people coming together and saying, this is what we authorize our city government to do. Are you seeing the screen from Deseret News right here?
Yes, Sam. Mm-hmm.
Okay, super. So I found this because I went to the internet and I went to the city's website and I'm like, I'm not seeing a charter anywhere here. Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Very real question. Because like, just this should be super straightforward and it should be super ordinary for any budget discussion, anything where anybody wants the city government to do anything. It should be understood that yes, the city has authority to do this pursuant to Article blah, section such and such of our city's charter. In other words, you people, we the people, already, you know, consented to this exercise of power, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, quite frankly, like literally anything goes, right? And so, like anything that they can sneak into there and make it look like it's kosher or just not raise too many eyebrows, like can even get funding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I hope we can appreciate just how troubling this is, because actually of all the government structures in our country, municipalities have the most power,
Yes. Yep.
and this is even according to our national founding documents, right?
Mm-hmm.
In
Yeah.
that the powers not granted to the federal government are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that pattern, I think we each need to flesh that out a little bit more and understand that our government doesn't grant us rights. It
Yeah.
just doesn't. It can't. It has no power to do so. Our own Declaration of Independence asserts in plain print that all human beings are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Governments don't grant rights.
Yep.
We, the people, grant to our governments very limited, conscientiously defined and bounded powers. And if you can't point to the powers that we, the people, gave to such and such a government to do X, Y, and Z, then you can't do it. It's that simple, right? But when was the last time we actually had someone raise that argument and have it heard and acted on appropriately? It's been like almost never, right? In recent
Right.
memory, anyway. So, anyways, this is why I was asking this question. And the city recorder, Tara Lynn, she was very, very good at finding this. She actually found some documents for me. And
Good.
so I brought these up in our last couple of city council meetings, and I emailed the mayor and all the city council members ahead of time, just said, hey, look, I know I'm new to this, and I know the timing is not awesome because you're considering the budget right now, and the state legislature says, you got to get this done right now, the next couple of weeks. And I'm like, let's at least read this for one. Let's read what we know about our the grant of power from the people to our city government.
Uh,
And let's just like look at the line items and the categories that we're spending on and make sure they actually match what this document says, right?
yeah.
So, and this is the act of incorporation. So this already, I will say this out of the gate, this is an unfortunate way of framing a city's founding document because yes, you need consent from your peers at least to
Yeah.
be able to join the like union. If a state wants to join the union, they need the consent of the other states in order to do that, right? Pretty straightforward, right? But
Yeah.
it's a lateral agreement. It should not be a top-down thing. And this is something we've forgotten ever since our colonial days and the westward expansion, is that the federal government started dictating all the rules. And what they've done is they've completely inverted the structure of popular sovereignty.
Hmm.
But even with that acknowledgement in place of that backwards way of doing things, yeah, they define like, what the city council shall consist of. But look here, they actually have an enumeration of powers. They say the city council shall have authority annually to assess, collect, and expend the necessary tax for roads, streets, schools. Okay, I'm not a fan of that one because that snuck in really early. And other public purposes. But at least it says this is what we authorize the government to spend money on. This
Hmm.
is what, the city council shall have power to do this, power to do that, power and authority to blah, blah, blah. Make all such ordinances not repugnant to the Constitution of the United States or the laws of the territory. And this right here is like, this is an overbroad grant of power. I will acknowledge that. But it's not proper, right? It's not proper for the state government to assert an authority that inverts popular sovereignty, if that makes sense, right?
Hmm.
It's like the
Basically saying they can
supremacy.
do anything they want as long as it's not against the Constitution or the laws of the territory. Is that, are you saying it's too broad?
Yes, and that interpretation, frankly, is contradicted by the substance and the contents of this document,
Uh-huh. Where it's
which
enumerating
consists
powers. Yeah.
of enumeration of powers, right? And so
Mhm.
because and this is a well-established legal concept. If you're enumerating powers, you don't get to exercise or assert any powers that are not among the enumerated few, right? Really
Mhm.
straightforward. Anyways, and so this is I've been going through this to analyze and see what's happened here, but the main issue that I'm wanting people to realize, and the main one that I would like to campaign on, frankly, is to help people rekindle their awareness of popular sovereignty
Mhm.
and say, hey guys, look, if there's something that your city government is doing that you don't like, you have full authority to tell them that they can't do it. And you have full authority to say, to ask us, hey, where is that written in our city charter that you get to do that? And if we can't give you an answer that actually grounds it in there in a specific enumerated power, then we can't do it. It's that simple, right?
Well, but that number 10 that you were showing says they can do anything. You know what I mean?
Well, no,
That'll make it hard for you to hold by that, right?
only if they ignore the contents of those documents, right?
Uh-huh.
Because we've got some aces up our sleeve right here.
Uh-huh.
Because the federal constitution explicitly says that it specifically reserves the power to the people,
Mhm.
right? And so you can't circumvent that by saying, well, we
Yeah.
give you blanket powers. No,
Hmm.
they can't exercise blanket powers because that would be repugnant to the federal constitution. They can't implement socialism via the park tax or
I'll be
other.
right back.
No worries.
Sorry, I had to check my printer. It needed some help. Hey, keep going.
No worries.
So let's say let's say that they want to go and zone an area, um, a business district, and someone says, "Hey, you don't have the right to do that according to this constitution or this charter." Would someone be able to say that and
Of
win?
course. Yeah. Yeah. Of course they can say it, and of course they can win. Like because if the city doesn't have a growth plan, for example, or if it doesn't even make provision for incorporating new territories or no limits on that, right? Then what should happen there is the people should be called together to say, hey, here's an amendment to our charter for your consideration.
Hmm.
If you're going to greenlight us to do this, to exercise this heretofore unacknowledged, unrecognized, out of whole cloth power, then you need to actually explicitly grant that authority to us. And I'm not a big fan of giving people rope with which to hang themselves.
Mhm.
Frankly, municipal codes and charters do give you a lot of latitude to harm yourselves and each other. But I actually do like the the qualification, which should go without saying. It's authoritative whether your charter says so or not. But if you're part of a state, then you are bound by the Constitution of that state. And if you're part of the United States, you're bound by the United States Constitution. That's the supremacy clause in action, right? And those handful of things that the federal or state government is authorized to do, you can't work against. You can't subvert locally, right? But at the same time, popular sovereignty, consent of the governed. And this is how it works. We gave the example of money systems earlier and how to solve that problem. The federal constitution says, hey, states, hey, municipalities, you have full freedom to go ahead and assert yourselves on Article 1, Section 10. Are you going to do it? We're not going to tell you that you have to accept gold. We're not going to tell you that you have to accept silver. You get to choose.
Yeah.
But you can't make anything but those a legal tender. It provides that you can make laws saying gold and silver coin shall be legal tender here, which is a great invitation if you think about it. Anyways, so I think it's fairly straightforward. Like, governments do not have power to do anything that we did not grant them power to do.
Hmm.
It's really simple. Like, and there are a lot of things in here that I read and I agree with. Like, I don't agree with everything in this charter, but at least it's a charter. At least it's an enumeration of powers. And they say, yeah, you get to build roads, and you have money to build roads through taxes, and here's how the taxes are going to be provided. And oh, and this is kind of interesting. Like, sections 24 and 25. Like, I would actually love it if we did this to regulate the storage of gunpowder, tar, pitch, rosin, and other combustible materials. Yeah, if like just I think it's a fun thought experiment. Take us back to the pioneer settlement days, and say, okay, this is Fort American Fork, right? This is Fort Union or whatever, and you've got these hostiles around you that you need to defend against. You have the untamed wilderness around you. You have federal agents who are threatening to harass you. What do you do? Oh, of course, we need city walls. We need to build a fort, which is one of the federal powers granted to our federal government in the Constitution, is to build forts. They're allowed to do that. And a city should definitely be allowed to, construct defenses for their own use. And so just seeing the fact that, like, yeah, numbers 24 and 25, like, to regulate and order parapet walls and other partition fences, anyways, keep swine and cattle from overrunning your residential area and stuff. Yeah, okay. But it's something that we have so little experience with. But this is an experiment I'm determined to do with my kids, is just to set them up and say, okay, you've got your own little mini city here. You have your own little town. What kinds of rules and regulations do you need for this thing to operate well?
Hmm.
And that would be, I think, one of the ideal thought and practical experiments for kids in school, for example, to try out, is to say, oh,
Tippling to tax, restrain, prohibit, and suppress tippling houses, dram shops, gaming houses, body, and other disorderly houses. What does that mean? Tippling.
oh, I looked it up. I think it has to do with something to do with the consumption of alcohol.
Hmm.
Um, Tax, restrain, prohibit, and suppress. My wife did point out, though, that even though it sounds good on its face, if you tax a vice, you're actually incentivizing the government to keep that vice around and even promote
True.
it
Hmm.
because they get money.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're legitimizing it by taxing it. So I think it should be
Right.
fined, not taxed.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Um, I wanna bring a quick topic in here. Off topic, but just intercede for maybe 2 minutes, if you're
sure.
okay. I'm gonna share
It's
my
your meeting.
screen. Um, so I'll share my screen real quick. Let me. There we go. Okay. Um, I'm a fan of Tucker Carlson because he brings people to the table that are involved in current issues or past issues, just to talk about things. So I a great thing about what he does, he puts a transcript of each of his conversations he has with people. So you can quote, copy, paste, look at it again and things like that. And so someone he re interviewed was Liz Collin. She was a reporter in Minnesota when the George Floyd thing happened, and her husband was also a chief of police, I think he was. And when it first happened, the deep state decided, hey, we're going to use this. They're going to use that to cause chaos in the country. And so they wanted their narrative to be the only narrative, and that the police are hurting black people and they're targeting them and get everyone all upset about that. Whites, blacks, everybody throughout the United States. So there's a little bit of chaos that they can use for their purposes, whatever they may be. And the chief of police, there, he was asked about what to do right at the beginning. He said, "We're not going to make any assumptions here. We got to wait for all the information to come in." And he was actually fired for saying that. And she was a news reporter, and she was actually eventually let go. But all of her news reports, all of her anchoring and everything stopped immediately because of what her husband said as chief of police, that they were looking for more information before they make assumptions, because the assumptions had already been made by the deep state about what caused that death of George Floyd and what they wanted to do with it, and they couldn't let the facts come in the way of what they wanted to have happen. So anyway, so she lost her position anyway, eventually in reporting, and he lost his chief of police position. And because they didn't, he wanted to see the police cams, the body cameras of the policemen. And apparently there must have been something on there that took away from their narrative that they wanted. So anyway, yes, past history, but it's repeating again with these assassinations in Minnesota. The same types of they did a look, just a quick oh, that was a Trump supporter and got all the people in Minnesota satisfied. That was a Trump supporter that killed some Democrats. That's the whole narrative. They don't want anybody knowing anything else about it. But yeah, you learn the past and you'll learn about what's going to happen in the future too, and what narrative the deep state wants for everything. So anyway, that's their narrative about those killings there that everyone's just accepting, is that it's a Trump supporter. But diving in and finding out why he did it, who paid him, what's going on, if he was paid by anyone, if it was just him acting alone. Anyway, love these conversations, and love to learn about firsthand stories from everybody. But anyway, that's my quick little thing that I did, and I've got someone here to meet with me, so you can continue um, with your topic while I go get the door. It's someone picking up flyers. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Uh,
I'll watch the video later, so I won't be here to
no
respond.
worries.
Go
I'm
ahead.
probably going to go ahead and clock out too, but thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, until next time, thanks everybody, and we'll end up posting this soon. So anyway,
Sounds
thank you
great.
very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Hey, thanks.